Thank you. I'd like to thank the workshop organizers and those who contributed to the unseen work that went into organizing such an amazing opportunity to bring us together to braid our knowledges to address climate change, a phenomenon that none of us can evade without working together as people or human beings. I am both humbled and grateful to share some of the ancestral knowledge that has been generationally shared with me for a larger purpose, to combine our awareness with action, or I prefer to braid our awareness with action. As human beings, each of us has a sacred responsibility for stewarding our resources and lands in an indigenous way, planning for the success 7 generations into the future. Like Bridge, I would like to recognize our ancestors that have traveled here with us. I'd like to also recognize this special place in the mountains and the waters. I'd like to introduce myself in Dinepizad, Navajo language, because what I'm sharing with you today is coming from my heart and from my lived experiences as an Indigenous woman and trained archaeologist. She'edzitlaninishle, do nimi pui paktise bashishchin, do kis ani e dashiche, do belagana e dashnele, akut ego e staninishle, lapoi idho den yesi nasha, do kinsanedit nashago. All of the women in my family, including my daughter and myself, come from a long line of Navajo Mountain Cove clan women who go all the way back to our creation. My father's people are the ancient Nimipu, or Nez Perce from northern Idaho. I was born and raised on the Nez Perce Reservation, but I currently live in Flagstaff, Arizona, under the protection of Dok'o'slid, our mother mountain, or the sacred San Francisco Peak. The information that I shared with you is the NEP protocol, Navajo protocol. It is also my first call to braiding awareness with action, to establish relationality or kinship. All of us are connected to a place. You need to remember this and find your own connection. Remember who you are. Through this extended kinship network, I have relied on family and culture to guide my research and teaching, as well as a profound respect for the power that is inherent in these systems. Because I am of the land, everything that we have been gifted by Diyandine'eh, our deities, such as our homelands, our language, the intergenerational knowledge, and my medicine come from the land. I ground myself in my homelands. In my Tamina, my heart, I know I was put on this earth to fulfill my sacred responsibility, to help my people thrive and survive, to protect our homelands and our sacred places in a way that braids, not combines, my indigenous knowledge and my Western academic training and education. The Diné, or Navajo people based in what is now the United States of America's southwestern states of Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico, understand themselves as being Nishle of and from their homelands. They have an ancient understanding of themselves and their connection to their homeland and all creation that provides a way of life that are conceptualized through 4 kinds of laws that are based on an ancient covenant through our foundational Diné laws, including our traditional laws, our customary laws, our natural laws, and our common laws. Taken together, these are called Diné. These laws guide our understanding of the place we hold within our environment, creating an intimate knowledge of how to live in Hajo, or in a complementary, loving, and supportive way with and within our homelands. My second call to combining awareness with action is to learn from Indigenous practices and knowledge holders in order to braid knowledges. Indigenous knowledge is embodied knowledge based on an understanding and knowledge that has been honed over thousands of years of observation, trial and error, process, and evaluation, or what Western science, and forgive me for that, I still haven't thought of a better name, taken to Chair Von Braun's point yesterday, but for now I'm still settling on Western science. What Western science refers to as knowledge, or a body of knowledge and the process used to gain that knowledge. Indigenous knowledges are localized and are a blueprint to survivance for our communities and for future generations. This also feels like the space to create a common ground with others who wish to help. Diné knowledge has also provided the Diné people with a 4-step scientific method that is based within our ceremonial knowledge and provides us with a way to hypothesize, plan, engage, or act, evaluate, and reflect on our experiences throughout the overall investigative process, and make changes as needed. This method is also aligned with our directionality and phase of life cultural teachings. Each direction and step of the Diné scientific method is bundled with traditional knowledge regarding prayers, colors, protocols, and teaching. Taken together, this method provides the Diné with a unique understanding and connection with their ancestors and their homelands. Unfortunately, through the insidious process of settler colonization, Indigenous knowledge has been relegated to myth or superstition and is considered outside of being usable or acceptable in scientific practice. This treatment of Indigenous knowledge from Western academia has excluded the intellectual and practical contributions and knowledge of the Diné and many other Indigenous people, from climate change and environmental justice issues that were created all around them through extractive resource practices by industry, US, and foreign governments. This is a shared experience for other Indigenous peoples, and the destruction, exploitation, and degradation of Indigenous lands, waters, and bodies has been and continues to be filled by settler colonial land claims for resource extraction and the belief grounded in colonization that Indigenous peoples are extinct or going extinct. We know that isn't true. Our languages and our cultures are alive. Our prayers, our offerings, and our songs connect us to our ancestors and to our past. They keep us grounded in the current moment and remind us to keep working for the benefit of future generations. This is what sustains all of us and motivates us to continue this work, because it is all of us. We are all human beings, five-finger earth surface people. For the Diné people, there is no distinction between the natural and the cultural world. The way that we understand the world dictates our relationship with the environment. We see much more than separate and disparate parts. Everything is connected and interdependent, including all of us. For example, our kinship system extends to the environment. There is a relationality that exists within Indigenous knowledge systems. The Navajo people have a holistic view of the environment that we inhabit based on thousands of years of lived experience that contribute to our knowledge systems. Our Indigenous way of life provides us with community-specific research approaches with which to investigate and understand our environment. This is how we steward and care for our homelands. I was raised in a very tight-knit community that emphasized keeping our sacred responsibility of serving the community and making it stronger for the next generation. This guides me in determining the kinds of research and service work to complete with and by Indigenous people. Remember, nothing about us without us. The third call of combining awareness with action is reciprocity. If the work that I complete does not benefit or help the communities that I am a part of or that I support, I will adapt it to be work that supports Indigenous nation building, addresses community needs and concerns, and builds capacity, both for the larger community and at the individual level. As the overall goal is to create pathways for more Indigenous scientists and citizen scientists. This has been a critical approach to research for me as a Diné San, as a Navajo woman, because for many years we have seen our data and information being taken and used for personal gain, publications and grants for tenure, for example, by researchers and sometimes used against Indigenous peoples by outside scholars. The impact of settler colonization on the relationships connecting Indigenous peoples to their homelands in North America, particularly in the United States, has been devastating. I also want to thank Jennifer, as she reminded me of an important point that Indigenous peoples are political beings. In the United States, we have to have a certificate of degree of Indian blood, an enrollment based on our degree of Indian blood, and we are the only group that has to prove our bloodlines in order to be Native American, which is also directly tied to our ability to maintain our current land base. If there are no more Native Americans, there's no more reservations. Our land is gone. And you've seen some of this in the United States in the Supreme Court. We're getting closer and closer to coming to that position. If we lose our Native American status, we lose our lands. The impact of broken treaties with federally recognized tribal nations has resulted in the fractionization of tribal lands and the displacement of Indigenous peoples, the traditional land stewards, from their usual and accustomed homeland, and consequently the destruction of waterways and food systems that support all people. The fourth call to combining awareness with action is to confront and interrogate misconceptions about Indigenous peoples and Indigenous knowledge. Within archaeology, my own field, there has been a historical rejection of Indigenous knowledge and site interpretations and in creating archaeological narratives that have become factualized and have removed Indigenous peoples as experts from their own culture. We're seeing a resurgence in the application of Indigenous ancestral knowledge in all fields, but we've particularly witnessed the power of traditional ecological knowledge in the fire management systems of Australian Aboriginal peoples and in California Indigenous peoples, for example. Indigenizing science begins by using Indigenous knowledge and in decision-making, in stewardship of the environment. It is support of Indigenous peoples in leadership positions, co-management opportunities for tribal nations and federal agencies, and the implementation of citizen scientist programs for conservation, environmental, and archaeological research and projects. The land back movement in the US means a reclamation of Indigenous lands by Indigenous peoples for the protection of sacred places, the reclamation of stewardship protection, and management of the environment back to Indigenous people. When you asked me what could we say, what could be said, it's land back. That's the action that we are requesting as Indigenous peoples. Give us our land back. We know how to take care of it. So how do we begin this work? We decolonize science. This is a two-step process that involves both settlers and Indigenous peoples and is also my fifth call to combining or braiding awareness with action. Decolonization is a process of deconstructing colonial ideologies about the superiority and privilege of Western thought and approaches, such as using the word discovery when referring to the New World or even to other scientific discoveries. To Indigenous peoples, the ancestral knowledge that has been passed down for generations has told us how to survive and thrive in our current homelands. This deep time connection has been demonstrated through the cultural affiliation, for example, of the Kennewick man, or the ancient one in the United States, a 9,600-year-old ancestor discovered on the Columbia River, one of the oldest ancestors discovered in the United States. There was about a 10-year legal battle that prevented Native Americans from burying him. And in that 10 years, scientists analyzed, destroyed this person's body to do all of these scientific studies without Indigenous knowledge or without their approval and interaction engagement. Finally, they did genetic testing and they found that he was affiliated with the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, something that was thought impossible by many archaeologists and scholars in the United States. More recently, we've had a discovery of an ancient fishing village in Idaho, 16,000-year-old site. It's known as Cooper's Ferry, but to our Nez Perce people, we call it Nepehe. We've known about this site for thousands of years. These two acts and these two discoveries have pushed the antiquity of the New World even further back than has been allowed by archaeology. Within a decolonized framework, we begin by dismantling structures and systems that perpetuate the status quo that actively works to sever the ties Indigenous peoples maintain with their deep past. The second part of decolonization is valuing and revitalizing Indigenous knowledge and approaches, making way for a shift from a sole reliance on Western colonial-based research approaches to approaches that include the spaces for alternative knowledges, such as Indigenous knowledges and research approaches. This includes weeding out settler biases or assumptions that impact Indigenous ways of being and Indigenous peoples in contemporary society. I want to bring attention to the ways that words and interpretations about Indigenous knowledges and people can be weaponized to dehumanize and diminish the connections that Indigenous peoples maintain with their lands. Most scientists trained within Western academic traditions lack training, skills, and experience to conduct research within this framework. Therefore, the act of braiding knowledges is my sixth and final call to braiding awareness with action. Efforts to braid Indigenous knowledge in Western science and research have demonstrated that commonalities exist between these two knowledge frameworks, and these efforts reveal that braiding these two knowledge systems is complex and challenging but is critical to addressing climate change. This is because both of these knowledge systems, okay. Let me just finish here with this last piece. Effective and appropriate braided knowledge methodologies require that research be carried out with rather than on Indigenous communities and involve plural coexistence of both knowledge. Indigenous cultures have plural coexistence framework, several of which use metaphors of braiding or weaving, and by utilizing an Indigenous framework of braiding to conceptualize and operationalize stronger and more robust research with and by and for Indigenous people. The verb-based metaphor of braiding indicates the importance of action, of utilizing braided knowledge and research that addresses a shared problem for mutual benefit. Just as with strands in a braid, both knowledge systems retain their integrity and they are stronger together. Thank you.